Planet Zero by Shinedown, one of the most awaited albums of the year, has arrived and made for some great songs, awesome riffs, and one big problem. Let's get into it. The opener 2184 sets the stage for this concept album. It's an homage to 1984 by George Orwell and has this 80s feeling that made me go, what is happening? And turns out that's exactly what they were expecting. Brent Smith has said that this is supposed to catch people off guard in order for the first song to hit like a sledgehammer, which it does. No Sleep Tonight has easily the coolest Shinedown riff since Sound of Madness. It kind of reminds me of something that Avenged Sevenfold would have done on Unholy Confessions way back in the day, especially with that sick tuning. It's amazing guitar work, and that also in combination with the great symbiosis with the drumming, one of the most energetic songs they have ever done, and that really goes for most of the album. The energy and anger that they have can clearly be felt in the vocal performance and the overall guitar work, which really sticks out from their last releases. This is also a good time to point out that the production and the mix on this album are a step up from Attention to Attention, which was already pretty good, but the intended roughness around the edges and the low tuning really make for a consistent, and different Shinedown album. The songwriting is also improved with a more diverse soundscape of slow, fast, heavy, soft, new and old school elements being present on different songs that do then still work well together to create one good sound. And while with the amount of songs that we got you will always have some overlap in sound, they managed to not feel repetitive. Some songs are clearly sticking out from the rest, like The Emotional Daylight, the powerful No Sleep Tonight, and the Clueless and the Dramatic, but also the fun closer that wraps up the theme of the album rather well. We again have some massive hooks that won't get out of your head, but we also get some energy-driven verses throughout the album, which is really nice. Pacing is a blessing and a curse on here. With a runtime of almost 50 minutes, they still manage to not bore you or give you too much of anything at once, which is pretty impressive. The flow of the songs combined with the interludes make for something that does give you a very enjoyable run, even if the song placement does not always fit the narrative of the concept album. Like Dysfunctional You just doesn't fit after the interlude that is welcome. Another song would have been way better there, but that's besides the point. So having said that this is musically one of their best albums, let's talk about the biggest downside this album has, the lyrics and concept. The album is set in 2184 on Planet Zero, a futuristic version of Earth, and we get to know what will ruin humanity. It's not climate change, it's not nuclear war or a pandemic worse than COVID, not a rise in fascism or other extreme ideologies, no, it's cancel culture. I really hope I wouldn't have to talk about this, but the theme is way too prominent on this album to ignore it, so let's give you guys some reasons to hate me in the comments. Let's be clear. The future that Shinedown are describing here is terrible and should be criticized. But the subliminal message that this is where America is heading and that what we are seeing in society now will lead to the Planet Zero they are painting is pure especially when looking at it from the outside as a non-American and a political scientist who's currently finishing his degree with a focus on American politics and culture. It's also worth noting for my American audience that in basically any other country, this debate of cancel culture isn't relevant. In most non-democratic countries, there is no such debate because they are truly censored, and in all other democracies, this "you are not allowed to say anything anymore, why can't I say the N-word?" argument is almost exclusively brought up by far-right extremists. Do with that information what you will. America is slightly different though, because the cancel culture debate is far more mainstream because it's been used as the boogeyman by so many populists, and what constitutes as being cancelled is a much broader spectrum. So I see how this is a much bigger issue for a band like Shinedown. Unfortunately though, these populist arguments that have been disproven time and time again have turned some of the lyrics on this album into Ben Shapiro's wet dreams. And don't get me wrong, some of the lyricism is actually not falling into this trap, specifically the slower songs like Dysfunctional You, Hope, Daylight. They're all good, and the lyrics are questionable in their content but well written. Sometimes. But too much of this album sounds like right-wing whining about not being able to say things because they are offensive. The premise is so flawed and sadly also embedded into the theme of the album because the interludes make such a mockery of the free speech aspect. If you find yourself complaining about government-regulated censorship, as they do on this album, that's the premise of the future, that's what they are implying, just because people are simply expressing their opinion now, that's always a flawed argument. Funnily enough, they have a song called The Saints of Violence and Innuendo, and then have a bunch of lyrics targeting specific groups of people but don't dare to say it out loud, so they are doing the innuendo and dog whistling, and I honestly think the irony is lost on them and a lot of their fans. Really think for a second about the line, "Your theory might be critical, but who is in charge?" and what that's implying. I am genuinely curious if this is what they were intending with this album, because they said multiple times that they are not taking sides and they just want to criticize the climate and politics and the moment, but this album clearly takes more shots at one side, so is this intentional? I fear it might be. Luckily, while all of the album is still clearly under this theme, you can ignore it on a couple of songs, and they even have some other valid things to say, so this album is mostly consistent in sound, theme and songwriting, but the lyrics are mostly too corny, on the nose and flawed in what they are implying to enjoy the album as a whole as much as I would want to. Musically, while not perfect, this album might be one of their best, but the overall experience leaves a sour taste in your mouth.